I watched a TED Talk by Tom Akesser, and he started with a Gandhi quote saying, "The difference between what we're doing and what we're capable of doing would solve most of the world's problems." And of course, I extrapolate everything to map consciousness, to trans consciousness. And Mania shows us the difference between what we're doing in our life and what we're capable of doing, or how we're capable of being as a human being. And it shows us how we're capable of seeing, the world, what attitude we're capable of having, what perspectives we're capable of taking. And this was the guy that was talking about how TED Talks don't do anything to change people, really. And I actually feel like Mania is an experience of embodying all the TED Talks without even having to think about it. So all that amazing research people are doing about all these different potentialities that human beings possess, one goes into that state and is living that way in daily life, and not as some super sports athlete that they had to work hard to be for 10 years in order to perfect the sport, but just automatically, without trying to do anything, like an act of grace, and then being that way in daily life, in one's daily actions, without having to have any particular thing, no motivation, no desire for anything in particular, not trying to do anything. And by not trying to do anything, one can do anything. Because by not forcing oneself into a single line of action or being or programming, one has access to the way by which one can deprogram oneself by just being intensely there in the present moment. And what does that even mean? It just means seeing the present moment as the present moment, from the perspective of the present moment as it arises, whatever arises as that. It's sort of like what Krishnamurti calls choiceless awareness, because one is not choosing anything, one is just very aware. If one has a motive, if one has made a choice about something, that means one cannot be aware of the rest of the field of reality. So by not choosing, by not having a motive, by not having a desire, everything is there as it is, because we don't need to desire in order for all to be there, here, right now. Mania shows us what we're capable of. It gives us a map of what we're capable of. And I remember how well I was able to rollerblade in that state. So I think, oh, am I supposed to do more of that? I think normal people need to listen to us and dance with us and follow our lead, because we can lead people out of the programming. It's not a matter of listening to TED Talks in order to get more programming. It's not the answer. It's to see that we are programmed. Because when we can see, not only can we see everything, we can also see the programming. We're blinded by dopamine. We compare everything to that reflex. We compare everything to the dopamine program. Is this good? Is this bad? Will this give me pleasure? Is this part of my desire? And that in itself is dopamine. We don't need desire when we can see clearly, because what we desire is to see clearly. We desire seeing, but desire prevents seeing. He gave an example of how there was this fish that fishermen used to throw as waste, and then they changed the name of the fish from Patagonian toothfish to Chilean sea bass. And when they changed it to Chilean sea bass, it was then marketable for sale. It was quite a scary looking fish, So to make it desirable, they changed the name. So I was thinking in terms of so-called bipolar disorder, if I call it transconscious altruism, that would be something that maybe even normal people would want. They might desire to be a visionary, and people do desire to be a visionary, and that's a visionary state. So we've given it the wrong name, and then from that it precipitates everything else. And that's why I made my little stickers of transconscious altruist, and I even put the writing in a font that makes it really hard to read, so people either have to really try to read it or they're not going to get it. They're going to actually have to see. And part of that is how I define myself is going to have an impact on my life, on how my life unfolds, because he was saying we are who we think we are, or the stories we have of ourselves. So that's why I feel it's so detrimental for one to hold a story of lifelong mental illness in their hearts and minds. He said, how I define myself will change the way I live, and we can only evolve our stories we have about ourselves. So for me, part of self-dialogue is evolving the story that I have about myself. And I don't even tell myself stories about myself, but this will do it in my brain cells, neurologically. It'll change the way I see things because I'll have those brain cells. So when something comes up, I will see it in a different context. I will see it in a different light. And he talked about how in life we make predictions. Our mind makes predictions about things and we act based on our predictions. Well, mania is just like predictions amplified. So the mind already works in a predictive way, and then in mania it gets to a point where maybe it predicts to the point where it's supposedly hallucinating or delusional or prophetic, and then we think, whoa, what's happening? Well, it's just a natural process in the brain turned on to a higher power. He said, who we think we are is why we do what we do. And that's true in terms of how now I don't feel I can work in the mental health system because that's not who I am. And I feel the story that we tell about ourselves, who we think we are, is part of how we can design a different game in reality. Mania shows us there is a different game in reality. It's the game of love and compassion. And he talked about something really interesting. He talked about there was an experiment done where people in virtual reality could decide to fly or not fly. And the people who decided to fly were way more likely to help other people in the real world. Think about that. Now in Mania, most people feel like a superhero at some point, or they feel like they're here to save the world and all these things. They feel these altruistic feelings. Some people feel like they can fly, or they might be able to fly. And this experiment shows that just allowing somebody to fly in virtual reality, meaning a gesture, a posture, an action that is equated to a superhero, is going to make them more likely to come and help other people in reality. What is Mania doing? It's doing the same thing, but it's doing it for weeks or months at a time, and a person is actually feeling like they are a superhero. So when they come back to reality, part of the point is to go and be a superhero, even though one has come back from that virtual actuality feeling of being a superhero actually. It's giving us that feeling, it's giving us that posture, it's giving us that gesture of feeling like a superhero so we can feel how freaking good it is, so we come back to this reality and we actually act that way. And the people in the experiment didn't know that was what they were testing for. So it was just those feelings inside, because they didn't fly for real, just the feelings inside that inspired them to embody the role of superhero in real life. And they had no clue. So giving people that experience in virtual reality made them more altruistic. Now, consciousness, the universe, can do the exact same thing in virtual actuality of mania, map consciousness, and then people come back, and that's why I feel it's really important to connect people with their altruism right away, because they were just in a state of feeling like they were a freaking superhero. And then they come back, and instead of saying, don't worry, you're a superhero, you're down and out right now, you'll get re-energized and we're going to get you back on the path of helping the world. No, they said, you're defective, you're diseased, you're wrong. It's just crap. So again, map consciousness isn't a problem, it's a solution. I feel part of that experiment is that people feel powerful. If they feel like they flew, they feel powerful. And that probably activates these really high levels in the brain because they were able to do things that they didn't think they could do. And that's partly what map consciousness does. Even if a person doesn't try to fly or think they can fly, they're experiencing all these other things that they're capable of doing and increasing their power. If 2 minutes of a pose standing with your hands on your hips is going to make you feel powerful, try 2 months in a state where you feel you can accomplish anything. That's going to make a person feel powerful. But that power runs out, but we can still get back to us. It's imprinted in our brain. Look what happened to people with an experience flying in virtual reality. They didn't actually fly, and then they are more altruistic. Mania and psychosis is trying to do the exact same thing. All the things we're trying to do in experiments in science, consciousness can do. We are that consciousness, so anything we try to do is mirrored within consciousness. Map consciousness allows us to actualize our potential, so then we can come back and move towards actualizing our potential, but not just for our personal selves, because a lot of us are out there in regular life actualizing our potential just for our own selves. And this state requires an altruistic brain. The missing piece probably to a lot of these TED Talk things and actually being able to live that way is altruism, because all those high capacities of humanity are not personal. They're not for personal gain. And personal gain, motive, desire, prevents it from being actualized. So trying to do it for a reason, like money or fame or all these things, is going to prevent it from happening. And some people do get money and fame and all that, and then they get to the top and realize it's not all it was cut out to be, because they're alone. And the thing with map consciousness is we actualize ourselves internally, subjectively, and then we come back here to do that in reality. Just like the people who flew in virtual reality, that was inner, subjective, didn't actually happen, wasn't manifested, but then they come back to reality and they act in those other ways. The act of flying made them feel like superheroes in real life. And I feel that's partly why it's important to tell oneself one's amazing stories of all the things one actualized within consciousness subjectively and partly objectively in life through the experiences of map consciousness. It's an equivalent of doing a power pose. It's going back to that place where it's like, oh yeah, I was able to be that way, and to remember how one was in that state, and to eliminate those things that impede that from happening on a daily basis. So it's very important to change the story, and that's why I've told myself a lot of stories, and I've told myself a lot of different things in order to write over the story of just thinking that my brain is defective. It's altruist consciousness. It's oxytocin consciousness. We need to be altruists and not have motives that are separate from life. And he said, we become the stories we tell ourselves, and that's why it's important not to tell oneself the story of pathology. It's just a story.